So welcome to my talk, Teach, Don't Tell, Becoming a Better Technical Mentor. I'd just like to say thank you for being here today. Thank you for being here virtually. Uh, it's great that I can still be a part of this. This is my first time presenting at this conference, and hopefully in the future I can be there in person. But we'll jump into Teach, Don't Tell, Becoming a Better Technical Mentor, where I'll be sharing a lot of strategies, techniques on becoming a better technical mentor, just sharing a lot of stories and things that I've gone through that have helped me become a better teacher and mentoring other developers in a technical space. So first off, a little bit about myself. I'm Thomas Desmond. I'm a developer advocate at Sitecore. And before becoming a developer advocate, I was doing university instruction. I taught mobile development class where people were developing mobile apps for Android and iOS. And I was also during that same time a full-time software developer. I made it up to a senior developer, working in a very collaborative environment where I did a lot of mentoring and teaching others as well. So quite a bit of teaching experience, and I want to share some of the stories that I have from that. I live in San Diego, California, so I'm a little far away, but it was great that I can still participate in this event and be able to be a part of it. And I'd like to just say thank you to all the event organizers, all the sponsors, really just all of you for being here as well. So that we can have this conference and everyone who's helped me put this talk together and make it what it is today. I encourage you to reach out to me as well. I'm on Twitter, Thomas J. Desmond. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find more information about me as well on my personal site, my blog, thetombomb.com. I'll also be sharing the slides on there at the end of this, and while posting them on Twitter if you want the slides, or if you just want to reach out and connect with me and talk in the future. So let's take a look at what we're going to go over today. So I want to share who's going to benefit from this talk. I really think that everyone here can benefit from it, but I want to get into that in a little more detail. Sharing the problem that I've seen, the problem that we kind of are introduced to, or the problem that happens when we are asked to be technical mentors. I'll share some of the techniques I've used in a classroom. These are going to translate well to a workplace environment. It's just the stories and kind of where they came from, where they originated, or from more of the classroom environment. And I'll also share some techniques that I've used in the workplace. And then we'll bring it all together in the end, kind of sharing and recapping it all. And I should have time at the end for questions, so we can have some questions both virtually and with those of you at the conference. So jumping in just first of who is going to benefit from this talk? Well, the easy answer is everyone. I think everyone could become a better teacher. Everyone can be better at sharing knowledge. We're all coming to this conference. We're going to be learning a whole lot, and I've had a couple other great talks that we've had so far today that I've watched and really learned a lot of cool things. So if you want to be able to teach things that you've learned today or that you're learning today at this conference, it's going to be helpful to have some techniques and things that you can take back and hopefully be able to use in your work environment the very next day, tomorrow, to be able to help teach some of your colleagues and share what you've learned. But if we want to get, I think everyone's the easy answer. It's pretty easy to say that everyone can benefit from this. But the people who might benefit the most, people are going to get the most out of this talk, might be mentors. If you're doing any sort of mentorship right now, senior developers, it's often in our job descriptions to do some sort of teaching when we're in senior dev or team leads. Maybe you're a coach, maybe you're doing some sort of teaching on your own, or even in the onboarding process. A lot of the stories that I'm going to share are going to be about onboarding processes as well, of bringing on new developers. But if you're a junior developer, if you're a senior developer, if you're really anyone, I think that we can all benefit from learning some great ways to teach and share all the knowledge that we have. We come to these cool events, learn a whole lot, and we can be better at sharing that knowledge and dispersing that with those around us. So I'm going to start off with kind of what is the problem? What problem have I seen? What problem have I been introduced to when trying to come up with teaching? And really, it's that we're never taught how to teach. A lot of us go through maybe university programs. We go to four-year universities, get some degree. We do a whole lot of learning there. Maybe we go to a boot camp and we're doing a whole lot of learning from that boot camp. Or if we're self-taught, we're watching videos, we're doing tutorials, we're self-taught for some sort of framework or tool. But we're never taught how to teach. We do a whole lot of learning, but we're really never taught how to share that knowledge, how to distribute that knowledge with those around us. So even our job descriptions, if you look at a job description for a team lead or senior developer, you're going to see in there that probably one of the job description items is how do I, like, we need to mentor junior developers or bring up skills of other developers, be able to really become that senior developer, become that team lead. You need to be able to go from just being able to put out good code or good quality content. You need to also be able to share that knowledge and bring others up as well. So I think the problem is that we're really never taught how to teach, but we're really taught how to learn really well. And we're learning all these new frameworks. We're learning new frameworks, languages, come to conferences, but we're never taught how to teach. And something that also comes up with this problem is that just because you know something does not mean that you can teach it. This is something hard to maybe realize sometimes, but just because you know something doesn't mean that you're going to be great at teaching at it. And this was pretty eye-opening for me, actually, when I started teaching that mobile engineering class or mobile development class at the local university. I was doing mobile development as my full-time job. I was creating apps. I was writing a major app for the company. We'd released multiple versions, and we were using this technology called Xamarin. And that was a cross-platform technology by Microsoft for developing Android and iOS apps. I think it's actually being renamed to Maui now, but I was using this technology, Xamarin, every single day as my full-time job. And then I was asked, hey, could you teach Xamarin at the university? And it went okay that first semester. But I feel sorry for some of my first semester students because it was a little clunky. I knew what I wanted to teach. I knew what I needed to teach them, but it was hard to get 35 students to understand what I wanted to teach and understand what I was trying to say. It was really a bit clunky that first semester going through, trying to teach something that I knew. So even though I was doing this every single day in my job, it was interesting trying to teach it that first semester, getting 30 students, 35 students up and running and working with this technology. Eventually, second, third, fourth semester that I taught of that, things went a lot smoother. I think I still got some good ranks or good students seem to like me overall. But I don't think those first semester students knew how bad I was at teaching it that first time around. So this is the problem that I want to bring up, or the problem that I want to introduce. And one other, just to really emphasize it, of this, how we're really not taught how to teach. Another time that this really came up was when I was growing a team. I was actually on a team where we went from 5 to 25 developers in 2 years. So we wanted to grow by 20 developers in 2 years. And I wasn't actually on that original team. I was hired as the 15th developer. So I was kind of right in the middle. But what it meant is that there was about 10, 15 before me, 10, 15 people before me, where those core 5 knew a whole lot. But those 10 people were still being onboarded and trained kind of themselves. They may have been there for maybe 6 months at most. And now in the next year and a half, 2 years, there's going to be 10 more developers being joined after me. So we did a whole lot of teaching, a whole lot of onboarding there, where we're trying to just bring a team from 5 developers to 25 developers. And we really realized how our onboarding process had to be changed, how we wanted to be better at sharing knowledge amongst people, especially when most people were new. Being able to have those 5 core developers that were there originally be able to share their knowledge and have everyone else who was coming onto the team share the knowledge as well. So this problem of never being taught how to teach really comes up a lot in our work environments, being that most of our positions we're asked to teach, and maybe we're doing a lot of onboarding or bring on developers where we need to bring on and teach more people. So I want to share 6 different techniques now and share some stories along with them of how we can become better teachers. And I want to start off with some effective techniques from the classroom. These are things that I've done in that classroom setting. Now, it's not just going to work with classroom settings or work with when you're working with large groups of students. I think these can work in small individual groups as well. It's just to kind of break up the talk and share some of the stories that come more from that classroom setting versus a workplace setting. And our first one is gradual release of responsibility. This is one of my favorites. This is something I was actually taught when I was teaching some online classes. I was making online video courses for Thinkster. They do web development courses, mostly focused around Angular, but they taught me a whole lot about how to bring people from zero knowledge in a subject to being able to be productive and develop in that. And this gradual release of responsibility came down to this I do, we do, you do approach to learning, where first I would do something all on my own, sharing that with the students, sharing that with whoever I'm trying to teach. Then we would do it together. We would do some sort of lab or work together. And at the end is the you do step, where hopefully now they are able to go out on their own, able to take that knowledge that we've shared and bring that into something that can actually be used and developed with. So an example of this would be maybe we're working with an API. So in the classroom, there's the I do step. I'm going to be in the front of the classroom teaching the students, and I would go through the process of getting my API key, making my GET request. I'm going to pull down my data from my API, and then I display that data out to the user. So I'm going to do that whole step by myself for that whole process, showing them from beginning to end how I can do it. In the classroom setting for this we do step, I'm probably going to take on some sort of lab or in-class exercise where we can do it together, where I'm in there helping the students out, going back and forth. So a common thing for this is providing maybe some sample code that's missing pieces, maybe 75%, 80% of the code is there, but they need to finish that last 20%. So in the we do step, we're working together, trying to build them up to having a working example where they can try out generating their own API key, maybe making just, instead of just GET requests, they're making POST requests too, changing data in the database or to the API, and just exploring a little bit more. And hopefully now after that I do and we do, there's the you do step, where maybe for this classroom example, I'm assigning homework that they have to now complete from beginning to end on their own, starting from scratch. So they're able to take that knowledge that I taught them, what we did together, and now be able to explore that on their own and kind of maybe find a new API or some other new service that they can pull down data from, making their GET requests, making their POST request, working with their requests, and being able to do that on their own. So this gradual release responsibility is that idea that we're taking from maybe zero knowledge and we're slowly building someone up in that I do, we do, you do approach to learning. And I find this to be really effective in the classroom, and it can be broken down even just like my entire semester was kind of I do, we do, you do, and it even broke down to my individual lessons. Each lesson would be gradual, and then it would kind of build up to this whole semester where now at the end of the semester, they're able to build their own apps, work on their own, and have apps that hopefully they can release out to the app stores as well. So I found this was really effective for working with students that maybe didn't have any knowledge in a particular subject. And I want to bring this topic up as well about questions, because it kind of fits in here in this gradual release responsibility. And it's the idea that questions are great. We want learners, we want people who are that we're teaching to be asking questions. It really means that they want to understand more. Maybe they have an idea on a subject, they're thinking about their API keys, or like, well, what if I don't pass in an API key? Or what if I change the arguments to this method and don't pass it in or make one optional? Having them think a little bit further is kind of means that they're curious, means that they're interested in learning more. If no questions are being asked, it generally doesn't mean that things were explained so well that nothing needed to be, nothing was mistaken or nothing was misunderstood. Maybe it's the case for you, but usually it's not the case for me, where everything was explained in such great detail and so amazingly that no questions were necessary. We want to be having those questions. It's a great sign if whoever we're teaching, especially if we're bringing them up from this gradual release responsibility, if whoever we're teaching is asking questions, trying to think more, especially in that you do step of trying to kind of think outside the box, break the boundaries of what they've been taught, and look how they could really use a certain language, use a certain framework, or build a particular application. And the next thing that I want to bring up is gathering feedback. And I think this is something that a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations, a lot of people really like, is that they like when feedback is gathered. They want to have that hopefully constructive criticism where they get some feedback, where they can improve on whatever they're doing, or improve on themselves, improve on what they're creating. So this gathering feedback is something that's really important. And it really helps the learning process in kind of determining how we can best teach someone, or how we can best do our teaching. But instead of just gathering feedback, I really want to focus in on the frequency of the feedback. And where this comes up in the classroom setting for me was my first semester teaching. These are 16-week semesters, so they are pretty long. It was 16 weeks with a 17th week actually for finals. So this was pretty long. I'm used to, when I went to school, I was in the quarter system, 10 weeks long with an 11th week for finals. So I was used to much, much quicker teaching in much more quicker, just going through courses. But these 16-week semesters, man, these were long. And there was a whole lot of content that could be put into these classes. But this gathering feedback piece, the first semester was 16 weeks long. At the very end of that 16 weeks, students were given a survey by the school. And the survey was great. It had maybe 10 questions, kind of some multiple choice of just kind of how was the professor, how were the lessons, and had some open-ended questions at the end of like what went well and what didn't go well. And luckily I got some average or above average results. So I was pretty happy with my results there on the feedback. And I got a lot of those written answers of kind of telling me how I can improve the course. But what it came down to is now I had like 30 pieces of feedback from these students for students that I would never have again. I had a lot of feedback on how to improve the course, how these students wanted to learn better, how these students wanted to learn differently. And I was not able to implement any of that feedback for them because they had just finished my class. That was the only class I taught and they were gone. So it was great to have feedback. It was great to have this ability to improve my class for future students, but I couldn't improve it for any students that I actually had. So I really changed up the frequency of the feedback for my students in that next semester. I now started getting feedback at week 4, week 8, and week 16. So I actually created my own surveys that I could give out to students. They were anonymous surveys. I think I got a lot better results when they were anonymous. Just students were able to be free with whatever they wanted to say. But now at week 4, that's 25% of the way through the class, I was able to get feedback, and I really just asked simple questions of what's going well and what's not going well. Now at week 4, I could catch if students are already falling behind. What are they struggling with? Can I help you out here at week 4, 25% of the way in? Because if you're already behind, things are not going to get better over the next 12 weeks if you're already behind 25% of the way in. That next feedback was at week 8. Being able to ask again, what's going well, what's not going well, and even adding in now a question of what do you want to learn? I was able to now improve the class on what was going well, what was not going well, but not only that, what I was able to ask, what do the students want to learn? How can I tailor this course to what you're interested in? We have 8 weeks left. There's time in between lessons for me to do learning to be able to figure out what you want to learn. So let's actually do that. So based on that, I was able to, one semester, students really wanted to learn about databases and how to implement a small database on your phone. So I learned about SQLite and how to have a little SQLite database on a phone. We taught that. One semester, students were really interested in ads. They wanted to learn how to monetize their apps. I don't think any of my students are millionaires from their ads yet, but they were able to learn something that they wanted to do. They were able to monetize their apps. They were able to do learning that they wanted to do. So I was able to really improve that frequency of feedback to change the learning, change what I was teaching to be effective with them. And it doesn't have to be these 16-week semesters. Maybe you're even just teaching a webinar, you're doing like a day-long class. You can ask it 2 hours in, 4 hours in, like, how are things going? What could be improved? How can we change this to be better for whoever's doing the learning? So we want to try and improve and change on the next mentorship opportunity, as well as the current one, be able to get that feedback again earlier. And I think just an example again of this that came up in a workplace setting. I was at a new company. I did onboarding for about 3 months. At the end of that 3 months, the company was like, hey, congratulations. You've passed the onboarding process. You've completed your first 3 months. How is the onboarding? What can be improved for next time? And again, this is that concept of, well, I can give you feedback, but you're not going to be able to change the onboarding process that I just went through for me. It would have been nicer maybe a month in, 2 months in, be able to ask, like, you're still onboarding, what can be improved? Instead of, hey, you finished this, we can't make any changes for you to make it better, but how can you make it for better for the future person? So we still want to improve on that next mentorship opportunity, but if we can improve on our current opportunities as well, that's just even better. Being able to ask people feedback while they're still in the process of either onboarding or being mentored or something along those lines. Okay, so we just looked at 2 techniques. We had the gradual release responsibility coming from that classroom setting, as well as gathering feedback, really focusing on the frequency of feedback. Now I want to share some stories and techniques that I've kind of used in a workplace setting, and also share some more interesting things here of just when it's kind of things that have stood out when I've mentored in more of a workplace setting. And first off is remembering what it was like to be new. This one, I think, again, we all want to remember what it's like to be new. We all want to, when we're trying to teach someone, kind of thinking back, like, oh yeah, what was it like to be a junior developer? But this one, I think, is actually probably the hardest because, I don't know, maybe you weren't a junior developer 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's hard to empathize with someone when you haven't even gone through whatever process they're going through, maybe 5, 10 years ago. Maybe you've been at a company for a long time and you haven't, the onboarding process has changed. So being able to remember what it was like to be new can be very difficult, but there's some things that I've seen done that can help really work with new people. Something that actually stands out just recently, I was working with a new product. Me and my team were developer zero. This is not public yet, but they wanted us to go through the process, kind of see what the developer experience was like, see what what it took to learn and what we had to do to get up and running this product, and hopefully find some of those early on bugs. So what we did, and what my coworker actually did, is he was able to remember all of these concepts that he struggled with trying to learn this new product. So he actually has a presentation, a whole PowerPoint documentation of when he was trying to learn this product, what videos he went to, what blogs he read, what articles that he had to pull in just to become an effective person in this software. And what that's turned into is this really nice getting started guide for the product. Because unfortunately myself, I didn't do this. So about a month later, they're like, oh, so what did you have to do to learn this product? And I was like, ooh, I know I read a blog, I watched a couple of YouTube videos, now I had to search back and find a bunch of links. But luckily my coworker, he'd actually done most of all, he'd found a lot of the articles that I'd had as well, and now had this huge list of concepts, this huge list of things. So I'm not saying that you have to do this for everything that you learn, but if you plan on trying to help others learn what you're learning, it could be very effective to just keep a list of what blogs, articles, things that you read, because it's really difficult for me to say, like 6 months from now, if someone's like, oh, how did you learn that JavaScript framework? I'm like, ooh, man, what was that special tutorial that I used? What was that really good article that I read? Because it can really help if each of you read the same articles, watch the same videos. It can really help because now you all have the similar base knowledge that you can build off of. So it's really helpful now that we have everyone, we're like, hey, if you're struggling with a new product, find these 5 things that you can give yourself a good base knowledge of it. We all have this base knowledge and we can help build it out and go figure from there. And another just personal story with this one was a refactoring project where a coworker or former colleague was building a refactoring project. He wanted this exercise for people who are familiar and want to do some advanced refactoring. He wanted me to try this out as another beta tester. So I was like, of course, I'd love to try this out. I'd love to experiment with this software that you're creating. So he gave me the GitHub repo and said, here you go. Try to get as far as you can without asking me any questions. I'll check back in a week and we can hopefully exchange some feedback. So I went ahead, I went to the repo, I had some free time, downloaded that, opened up VS Code and tried to see what was going on. And my project didn't build. So I now had to figure out a bunch of different little errors. And what really it came down to was I was missing dependencies. So my laptop was not set up for building and working with his project. It was on much newer software or dependencies than what I had installed. So when it came back to actually providing feedback, most, if not all of the feedback, like 90% of the feedback was really just in the getting started process, those prerequisites. And it just came down to, I needed this .NET version. I needed to install these packages. I wasn't on this version. I was on Windows 11. I was on Windows 10. So it was just these little pieces where he was like, oh man, like I would have never realized that, or I wouldn't have seen those because it worked on his machine. We've heard that before. But I was able to share just a lot of like what it's like to be new for a project. So it's not only what it's like to be new for different frameworks, for learning different languages. It's even just what it's like to be new. You're given a new laptop and what software needs to be installed. How can they be effective, or what do they need to install to become effective for this new job, this new position? And just remembering what it's like to me. It's really hard, especially when being new was even months, years ago. It can be difficult to think back and try and remember what it was like to really be new when you're doing something. or when you're trying to teach people. So trying to empathize with that. The next technique that I want to show here is running the experiment. And this idea is that we want to encourage experimentation. And I think a lot of companies, again, a lot of organizations want to encourage experimentation. They want to encourage people trying new things. That's something that you hear a lot of mission statements or a lot of different organizations trying to encourage this experimentation, trying new things. I think a lot of us have trouble with if we ever hear, well, that's how it's always been done. That can be a statement that we do not like to hear, that we're just like, well, why is it done that way? Or why don't we try something new? We want to avoid that. Oh, it's always been done that way. It works, so let's not mess with it. We as the software developers, we want to try new things. We want to try these new frameworks, see what happens. So we want to encourage this experimentation, especially with someone who's learning. We want them, if they're curious, they're going to learn the most. If they experiment and do things on their own, they're going to learn the most. It's in the classroom setting, there's only so many things that I could teach a student. It was really when they started exploring and reaching out. If I had 45 minutes to teach them, there's only so much I can teach in that 45 minutes. It's that exploration, that homework that you do step to that graduate release of responsibility again, that is where that real learning happens. But something that I really want to focus in on with this run the experiment is this concept of learning theft. So at a previous employer, we had a thing called learning theft, where it was possible to steal learning away from someone. And the idea behind this was that if someone came up to you and said, hey, what if I don't pass my API key into this application? And you just said, well, that's not going to work. You don't need to try it. That would be considered learning theft, because they had an experiment that they were thinking about, and we kind of just shot them down and said, you don't need to try that. It's not going to work. This could have been a great learning opportunity. We want to encourage that running an experiment, not just for big things, but just for these small things as well. So if we had said, like, if someone came up to us and said, hey, what if I don't pass in an API key? The response should be, well, give it a try, see what happens. Because now that developer is going to go find maybe the service that authentication happens that they've never seen before. They're going to have to now find where the API key is, where it gets imported in from. So they're now going to delete that from their application. They're going to change the method so it doesn't do authentication. Maybe they try running it, and now they're going to get some sort of error back. Maybe they're getting that HTTP 400 error, some not authorized error. So they're learning about the authentication process, about that authentication service that we have, a little bit about HTTP codes. Now they're learning as well that the authentication process handles these, it actually handles the API key. It's something that actually gets checked. And now they can learn, like, okay, now I need to put that back in. They make the call, like they put the API key back in, make the call again, and now they get that 200 okay response back. Like, okay, so it is the API key. I'm experimenting. I've learned that it's the API key that's going to determine whether or not I'm authorized or not. And just that little bit of experimentation there is going to add up to really being a lot of learning. They were curious about something. They were able to execute the experiment. They were able to learn from it in the end. And that's just a really simple example. But if someone comes up and says, hey, what if I try blank? We really want to encourage that, like, oh yeah, give it a shot, see what happens. We want to avoid that learning theft, taking away from learning from someone and really just kind of shutting them down and saying, oh, that's not going to work, or I know this better method, let's try it that way instead. And there is a caveat here, like we don't want, there's a line where you just don't, if someone says, hey, well, what if I try rewriting the entire service in this new language? You're like, okay, well, maybe we don't need to let you try out this new obscure language that no one's ever heard of but you, to let you learn how to do this. There is a bit of a give and take on what makes sense, but maybe we could encourage that in other ways. But making sure that especially if there's small experiments, if we think it's something that the person can learn from, trying to avoid that learning theft. And another way that this comes up is, if you've ever heard the quote, make it work, make it right, make it fast. This is a quote by Kent Beck. And it's something that I really like when I'm developing software, is the idea of, hey, first, just make it work. We don't need that fancy solution. It doesn't need to be the best solution. We just want to see if there's no reason in going further if we can't even just make it work in the most naive solution. And this is where maybe you have a junior developer who has a naive solution to something. You're like, hey, yeah, give it a shot. We can just make it work for now. Next up, when they after they've had it, maybe they've got that make it work solution working. It's just overly complex though. There's some refactoring that can happen. We can work with them to make it right. We can try and find some refactoring, reduce the complexity, add more tests, and try and make it right. And then last, the make it fast step. This is something that's, depending on who you talk to, maybe it's optional, of the idea of now, if we have time, we can make it fast. If we have the ability, we can try and improve it and make it the fastest solution. But depending on there's priorities, product ownership, the whole make it fast step can be a little bit more difficult. But with this running the experiment, the idea here is avoiding that learning theft. And we want to if they have a solution that they think can make it work, let them, and then we can work together, kind of mentorship and teaching to make it right. So this, I really like this idea of learning theft. It's something that really came up. It hopefully doesn't come up often, but it's something that we are able to use. Like, yeah, they run the experiment and really try new things. We want to avoid that learning theft. All right, next up we have don't just tell the answer. This is an important one because we want to encourage discovery of answers. We want to encourage someone new to be able to find the answers, how they're going to kind of debug solutions, how they're going to find solutions on their own. We can't support them forever. So we want to kind of allow them to encourage discovery, encourage them to find things on their own. And where this comes in is, again, which I have a lot of, I like APIs. I got a lot of API related examples. But if someone were to come up to you and say, hey, how do I generate an API key? You can say, hey, go back to your desk, I'll email you one. Or you can try and provide the resources in the documentation and say, hey, like, here's some resources for the documentation. I think this is a good learning opportunity. You're going to have to learn about this documentation. You're going to have to use it a lot in the future. So why don't you start with this easy article and see how you can generate this API key on your own. And something that you might want to go on, depending on what you're teaching or what you're providing resources on, you can even say, and if by the end of the day you don't have a solution, see me tomorrow and we can work on this together. So a good thing to come out of this is that it's a good idea to tell the learner your plans, because sometimes I've seen this don't just tell the answer taken to a little bit of an extreme. If someone said, hey, how do I generate an API key? And you say, figure it out. That's not really the method that we're looking for here. We're looking for more of the, hey, here's some resources. I want this to be a learning opportunity for you. I think that this is a great entry into our documentation. If you don't have a solution by the end of the day, come back to me. Because the, hey, go figure it out solution is not going to help out very much. And an example that I have for this, one of my first jobs when I was a junior developer, I worked with a pretty tricky product. It was hard to understand, hard to wrap my head around, especially as my first job. But I had this coworker, and he was super smart, and he'd been at the company for about 20 years. So he knew just about everything about this product that I was working. He was on 20 years, and he was on this team for 20 years. So he's written almost most of the code, it seemed, for this project itself. So anytime I went to him, he basically knew the answer and could do it on his own pretty quickly. So I would come to him often when I was stuck, and I might have been stuck only for a couple minutes, not even that long, before I'd go over and say, hey, I need help with this. Can you help me out? And often he would then take my solution and just kind of run with it and write it up, and we'd be done. I might watch him code. I might watch him go through it, but there wasn't a whole lot of learning going on. And what it kind of turned into is now whenever I had a little tiny hiccup or a little struggle, I could go to him and immediately have my struggles over, and he would find the solution and kind of mostly implement it for me. Now, this was great for my PRs and bug requests or bug fixes because my name was associated with it, and now he fixed it, but I look like I fixed it. So really kind of nice for being able to get things done, but terrible for a learning opportunity and being able to encourage discovery and encourage me to find resources as well. So I think in the end, not that great, but it did make me happy at the time at the beginning of it. But I really hoped I could learn more at the end of that. And now, one time I was actually given this presentation, and I was asked What if you don't know the answer? What if you're not aware of the answer? So what if you don't know the answer? Perfect, because we're not supposed to tell the answer. Even better. But what if that's not really what we want to do. If we don't know the answer, we want to somehow provide some resources for them. And I find that a lot of the kind of what if we don't know the answer might be someone comes up to us with kind of an obscure bug or something that's difficult. So an example is that someone says, hey, my code's failing. I'm getting this stack trace. What do I do? And it's really difficult for you seeing a stack trace to know maybe exactly where to take this code or exactly where the problem is. So now you can work together. So this is a great opportunity for you to show how do you debug questions, how do you find answers? Especially if it's a debugging exercise. Debugging is this kind of weird art. It's not of science, not art. You could read a book on debugging, but you're not going to be good at debugging until you actually kind of go through a solution and try and find out where are the log files? Why does that log file seem to point to this file? Where are kind of the entry points to start to take you into these paths of debugging? So if you don't know the answer, this would be a great opportunity to work with the person, work with them to show how you debug or how you find answers. It can be really eye-opening, and something that can be a really great teaching opportunity is to be able to just show how do you find answers, because it's something very debugging is not something easily taught or something that easily can be it just can't easily be taught. So don't just tell the answer. A great way to encourage discovery. Last, we have this last concept that I want to go over is understand the why. I think this is a really big way to separate between good teachers and great teachers, is when you can understand the why. If you can teach why something's going on, it's really going to improve how something is taught. So if we can understand why something is done, not just how something is done, it can really, really change that teaching and learning aspect. If you're able to say why we chose a specific framework, why we're writing in Visual Basic instead of C#, if there's a good reason for it, if we can share what's really coming out of this and why we chose certain things with our applications. So that's something pretty difficult, especially if there's long past historical choices. Being able to answer again, well, maybe we should experiment with something else. If the answer is, well, it's always been written this way or always been done this way, we're not even sure why anymore. But that's something really important to explore. So the story I have with this is around dependency injection and Angular. If you're not familiar with dependency injection, that's fine. If you're not familiar with Angular, that's fine as well. It's a JavaScript framework, kind of competitor with React, but that's not really too important to the story here. But the idea is that I was trying to, I was creating a new web page for an application, and in that page, I needed access to a particular service. And I was told that dependency injection was the way that I needed to get access to that service inside of my application. So I had never done dependency injection before, and I asked a colleague, hey, can you help me out with this? I need to call this service. I need to make this request. How do I get access to my service? And they gave me the answer of, okay, so this file over there, you see a file up there, go to that file, line 23, copy line 23, paste it on 27, and at the end of that file, or in that line, rename it to your page name. Okay, I could do that. Now, the second file over here, go to this next file and see line 10, copy that, paste it on 11, and change that to the service that you're interested in. Okay, that sounds good. Now go back to your original page, come back to your original page, and inside the constructor now, add the code. You see the lines up there, you're gonna, like the other services, add that service into the constructor, and now set that variable equal to something that's kind of more global in your application. Okay. And they're like, now you have access to your service. You've got access to that service in your page. So that's dependency injection. Change this file over here, change that file over there, and then edit the constructor. Okay, I understand how it is, but why am I doing that? Why is that important? Why do I why do I want to have this file inside of these? Why do I need to modify these other two files just to get access inside of my page? Is this easier? It feels weird. I don't know what this file over here is doing. And unfortunately, the person I was working with, they didn't really have a good answer for why. They just had the how. So I was able to move forward. I was able to progress more with my development, but I didn't really understand why I was doing certain things in development. So I actually ended up, we worked together on trying to solve the why later on and figuring out why we were doing it this way, why dependency injection might work, and kind of the overall architecture and framework to using dependency injection, because I didn't want to come over from the Angular JavaScript world. If someone asked me like, oh, do you know dependency injection? And I said, yes, but we're in C#. I can't be like, oh, you just edit this file over here, you edit that file over there, and now you go back to your constructor. It's not going to be the exact same. The pattern's not going to be the same. I wanted to learn kind of that overall pattern, not just something very specific to Angular. So being able to understand the why, being able to teach the why, not just the how, can be really great in exploring how something can, like, really great in teaching and be able to lift people up that way. I think going back to even just that first semester of me teaching, that's what I really needed to learn. Was I knew how to develop with Xamarin, I knew how to release an app, I knew how to develop an app, but I didn't know why some of the choices were being made. I didn't know, I wasn't really sharing with the students as much of the why I was making certain choices. I was sharing just a lot of the how. So once I was able to conclude the why as well, I think students really started to connect, really being able to connect it to other languages or other frameworks that they've used before. And it was really, really effective way of teaching when I could actually show the why as well. Okay, so I've done a whole lot of talking, but how do we can bring this all together? How do we kind of bring everything that we've learned together? And what it comes down to is inspiring curiosity. I mentioned it a little bit with some of the other talks or other techniques here, but we want to inspire curiosity. If we want to really teach someone, if we want them to learn, if we want them to be able to learn and build out on their own, we're going to need to make them curious. We want to be able to create an environment where they can be curious, where they can ask questions, where they can experiment with what they want to use. So looking back, we did gradual release of responsibility. That was the I do, we do, you do approach to learning. And being able to take people from zero knowledge maybe to being able to work with mobile development or be able to work with some other technology. It's a great way of building up that curiosity, taking them from nothing, doing it, I do it, then we do it together, and then that you do step, hopefully releasing them when they're curious, they have enough knowledge to be able to try something out on their own and be able to kind of go through whatever their curiosities are. We looked at gathering feedback, and the gathering feedback really focused in on the frequency of the feedback, the idea that wanting to get more than just one set of feedback at the end of something, the end of the onboarding process or the end of the semester. We want to try and get more feedback more quickly so that we can actually iterate on it with our current people that we're teaching and improve it for those who have to do this in the future. Remembering what it was like to be new. If we can empathize with those that we're teaching, we can help inspire more curiosity and provide them with the resources and provide them with the tools that helped us learn so that they can now become and use, and whatever curiosity they have, we can inspire that through remembering what it was like to be new. We had run the experiment and really focusing in on learning theft, trying to avoid that learning theft so that whenever someone is curious, we can really let them go along with that curiosity, be able to run their experiments, learn on their own. And there is that, like, you don't need to let them take weeks, months off to try and learn or run some strange experiment, but allowing people to, if they have an idea, if they have something that's worth trying, allowing them to run that experiment, taking it that make it work, make it right, make it fast mentality to learning and teaching. We had don't just tell the answer. We want to encourage discovery, allow people to learn how to learn as well, so that we can provide those resources, provide the opportunities to learn. And even if we don't know the answer, showing them how we find answers so that they can, when they're curious about something, can find the answers on their own. And the very last one that we had was understanding the why, understanding why something is done a particular way, not just how something is done. So we looked at all these really cool techniques: gradual release responsibility, gathering feedback, remembering what it was like to be new, running the experiment, don't just tell the answer, and now understand the why. And something that actually came out of this in the past, when I said, hey, we need to inspire that curiosity. That's where the most learning is going to happen. That's when, if you're curious about it, if you really want to learn about it, you're going to do the best at learning for it. And someone asked me, well, like, what if someone lacks curiosity? What if someone is lacking that curiosity? And I'm going to take the approach that the person is still, they're interested in it. They're interested in at least the technology. They got into the programming or whatever job that their role that they're in. They got in it, hopefully because they had some sort of interest to begin with. So if the person lacks curiosity on what's going on, now, such as they're like asking no questions. If the person's lacking that curiosity, there's no questions being asked. We want to look for the hook. Like, what brought them in initially? What got them interested in this technology? What got them interested in this role? What got them interested? What was the last thing that you taught them that they were interested in? Maybe why were they interested in it? That's going back to gathering feedback. Maybe we can ask some feedback on why that curiosity is lacking. Another great way just to kind of inspire that curiosity might be to ask leading questions. Trying to ask students or someone, like, what if we try it this way? What if we change our arguments? What if we change the data type? What if instead of using passing along all this data in our argument, we pass it along some other way? So a great way to encourage that curiosity might be to ask leading questions, ask things that can kind of get them thinking a little bit more as well, or finding that hook that got them interested to begin with. And another thing that might even just be because I've been talking for 45 minutes is this kind of information overload. You're at a conference, you've been going to a conference all day, you've got talks to visit tomorrow. There's this information overload. If you are overloaded with information, especially myself, if I had just gotten too much information in one day, or just I'm learning so much, it's hard to really think outside the box. I can only really take information in. I can't maybe expand upon it and kind of think how to build it out too much if I've just been given too much. So we want to try and reduce that cognitive load. And this really comes into like conference talks maybe, but also with that onboarding process. If you're bringing someone up, if you're trying to teach something new to someone, trying to reduce that cognitive load. At a previous employer, I was told that onboarding was like drinking from a fire hose. And this idea that there was just so much information going to be thrown at you. It's like the fire hose water was on and you're just getting sprayed with endless and endless amounts of information. And now this is interesting. It's kind of funny. But when you're actually in the process, it really wasn't that funny. It was pretty draining to, at the end of the day, just be like, oh man, I've got so much I needed to learn, so much I need to kind of review, so much that I need to try and get to stick in my head. It's just not going to happen. So if you find yourself saying that your onboarding process is like drinking from a fire hose, maybe we can try and find some ways to reduce that cognitive load, maybe spreading out the onboarding process. Maybe you don't need to have on the first, second, third day lunch with the CEO, lunch with the product officer, lunch with your boss. You don't need to have these these lunches with some big wigs at your company. You can spread them out a little bit more. That's one way that I've seen just people get a little overloaded. They just got a whole lot going on with their onboarding process of just too much information, too many people that they're meeting in their processes. But with that, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Teaching, hopefully giving some strategies, giving some techniques on how to be better technical mentors. Hopefully you've got something that you can take with you tomorrow and in the future. Again, I'm Thomas Desmond, developer advocate at Sitecore. If you'd like to reach out to me, Twitter is one of the better places to find me, or you can reach out on my blog, thetombomb.com, and I'll make sure to have the slides up there if you're interested as well. But I think we have some time for questions as well. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, the organizers. Thanks you, everyone, for being here today. And it's fun that you can have me, especially remote. I'm glad that this hybrid situation worked out.